Now, what are you going to say when you meet somebody you haven't seen for over 30 years? The last time I was in the same room as the sports journalist Mike Calvin, it was my 21st birthday party. And from memory, that was a long time ago. And I hadn't seen Mike since. We both got wider. We both acquired more than one chin or two. We both now wear glasses for reading. But I still apply the glasses to read his books. Now, he's had 2 out of late. Mike Calvin, Family, Life, Death and Football. A year on the front line with, as he calls it, a proper club. And the proper club is Millwall. Now, I was a bit surprised about this book because I remember from my 21st birthday party and from working in sports newspapers in Fleet Street in the 70s with Mike that he was a Watford fan. So obviously you change your underpants, you change your socks, you might even change your lover, but you don't change your football team, do you? But Mike Calvin, I discovered, is no longer a Watford fan, and it's all because of his research and his time spent writing this book.
It's one of those things that you can change your wife, you can change your religion, but you never change your
underwear, change your socks. You can't do it.
Well, you've got to follow your conscience. I just thought, well, if I could really get inside a football club like that, I would educate myself and I would hopefully educate other people, because people, Millwall is, I think, a fantastic football club which has this one-dimensional image, and there are so many lazy stereotypes about it that I wanted to attack. So basically, I went to him and said, look, I want to have complete access to your football club. And he thought about it for 10-15 seconds and said, well, okay. Which I was amazed by, to be honest. And so the result was Family, which people have been very kind about it, and they sort of likened it to the Glory Game, which was a similar sort of fly-on-the-wall type view of a club over a season. And within that, I did discover what I was looking for, which was a group of men who were ordinary yet extraordinary. They were journeymen pros, a lot of them, but they cut them and they all bleed. And what I found, and the reaction has been it's been really, really good, in as much as that people have picked up on the humanity of these footballers. They're like you and I. You've got a mortgage. They have more problems than you and I, because they're on sometimes a month-to-month contract, a year, 2-year top whack. So they've got their wives saying, well, what's going to happen to us? Am I going to have to move the kids? Are they going to have to find new schools? Are we going to have to buy a new house? So you've got these guys going through the other ordinary traumas of normal life, birth, death and marriages, and divorces. So I was able, because I had complete run of the football club, to really get underneath the skin of what I felt was being lost, which was the humanity of the game. And it was a fantastic privilege, because I spent a lot of time in the dressing room, and it's a really interesting phenomenon, really. Essentially, I turned up first day of pre-season training, and 333 days later, I was on the substitutes bench at Wembley when they got promoted in the League One playoff. And during that time, what happened was, players were looking around saying, well, what's he doing here? But they quickly picked up, one, there's a hierarchical nature in football anyway, so the manager was happy with it, the chairman was happy with it, the chief exec loved it as well, so they went along with it. And it was very, very quickly, I was assimilated into their group. So for instance, in the dressing room, I was part of the fixtures and fittings, so they acted completely naturally. It wasn't as though I had a camera on my shoulder or anything like that. It was just me, and I used to lurk behind the showers when it was all kicking off, just because you weren't seen. But basically, they, as I said, assimilated me into the group, and what was happening was all their rituals I had to play a role in, and I didn't realise. Just early in the season, just before everyone goes out, there's a huddle, or the people circulate, and it's a shake hands. And the first time I did it, I just basically said, have a good one, to everyone, all the players that came to me. And probably, 80-90% of the players did. And they won that game. So next game, I had to say, have a good one, because of the superstitious nature. And then it just became second nature. I was on the bus all the time, at training a lot, and they couldn't quite work out what the hell I was doing. I was there making my notes. But when the book came out, there was a realisation, right, he has captured a key moment in our lives, in our careers. And what I found really gratifying was the response of the players and the club, because, they took a heck of a gamble to let someone like me loose on their football club. And I met a lot of the fans, and hopefully people say that it has changed people's opinion of the football club. There's still a lot of lazy nonsense written about them and spoken about them, but it was a fantastic experience. So, and this is probably the longest answer to a question that you've ever had in your life. So, having had that experience of what I call a proper football club in real life, I then go back to Watford, which after Graham Taylor was the moment was a night in September a couple of years ago when Millwall played at Watford, and I was in the boardroom as a guest of the Millwall directors, and Graham Taylor was the host, and I spoke to Graham, and he was really he struck me as a very distant, very sad, unfulfilled figure. And the club was under the control at the time of someone called Lawrence Bazzini, who had changed his name, or changed the spelling of his name, when he'd been made bankrupt a few years earlier in 2007. And you'll know as well as I, Vern, in this profession, you do operate on instinct a lot. And the hairs went up on the back of my neck. And frankly, I loathed the guy, and I didn't like what he'd done to the football club. And
so
it was, yeah, and the sort of Damascene moment came. It was a desperately bad game, an awful game between two teams who at that stage were lacking confidence and quality and class. And Millwall went into the lead. And I found myself clenching my fist. And I was celebrating my team, Watford, losing to my other team, Millwall. And Millwall were going through a bad run at that stage, and they conceded 2 late goals, and they lost 2-1. And I was devastated. I was frankly devastated.
After how many years of supporting Watford?
30, yeah. And so, and again, the one thing that the Millwall book taught me, and the Millwall people taught me, was be true to yourself. And I just felt I had to come out, if you like, and say, well, actually, I wanted my team to lose, so therefore it's not my team anymore. And that's what. And I know people really struggle to get.
Well, Watford fans clearly do on Twitter.
They don't love me. No, that's true. But I look at what's happened to the football club now. The Pozzos have taken over, and essentially, that club, which used to be the heartbeat of its community, is now a factory farm for a bunch of businessmen from Udine in Italy. There is a raw, almost brutal honesty about Millwall that some people just don't get.
It was a scary place to go when we were occupying press boxes in the 70s.
Yeah, well, it's a different world then. And it's interesting, I meet a few boys now who are our age and who were lively at that time.
Right.
And, they still... there is a nostalgia about it. But I think now, they look at some of the antics of some of the little kids now and they shake their heads, because some of these guys are grandfathers now, And what these fans will do is they'll forgive anything and anyone if they give everything of themselves. But if you cheat, or if you pull out of a tackle,
yeah, you'll know about it.
Big time. And essentially, I haven't got a problem with that. And they love wine. I've seen people freeze in that tunnel, because that was when there's always a great there's a great bit of theatre that no one ever sees in a football stadium, which is what happens when one team comes out of a dressing room that way, one team comes out that way, and there is this sort of it's like two human tidal waves hitting one another in the middle, and you're in the middle thinking, right, who's going to do what? What's going to happen here? And I can remember a couple of games. There was a playoff game against Huddersfield, and you looked in the eyes of every Huddersfield player, and you knew they did not want to be there. And it was that night. It was just, they have something at Millwall called the Monk's Chant, which is this just sort of atonal drone. It's a bit like a verbal death stare.
Come on in, do it.
Moo ad nauseam, right? And that was that ground literally shook that night. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic, and to be on the bench and then in the dressing room after that, and you see the joy that delivers, was just a real. It sounds really corny and crass to say, "Oh, that was a privilege," but it was fantastic. Within that dressing room, there were some really, really strong characters, senior pros, who had very strong personal and professional standards. And I called them in the book, I called them the governors. And they basically, it was a self-perpetuating dressing room, really. It really worked well. And I find it really interesting that, football, the life cycle of a football team, 2-3 years max. What's interesting, talking to Ken now, is that the governor spirit, if you like, is back. And so there are a new set of players who are almost, by some sort of emotional osmosis, they've got the same drive and the same instincts and attitudes and inclinations that the previous mob had. So it's fascinating. Now that must be about the football club. I know that I'm now a true Millwall fan because at 20-10 last night, when they won, the first thing I worked out was that we only needed now 18 points to stay up. So
you were celebrating that, and I was celebrating them bringing off a double bet, 9-1 double, a win for Watford and Millwall.
You bet. So you bet against your own team, did you?
Yeah.